Alright, let's see how I handle this. It's been a couple days since I started the Oklahoma video, so I'm just going to carry on here where I left off. So on a Sunday, we left, myself and the woman who was accompanying me to Tulsa, Oklahoma, to have this supposedly fair, dignified testing that is done for everybody that they accept to come there, regardless of what they think is wrong with you or what may be wrong with you. Basically, you have that hour phone call with them if you're long distance, and I was already all the way on the East Coast in Virginia at the time. And they make a commitment. You know, you find the plane ticket to get there. You have to bring somebody with you. It has to be the person of the same sex, I believe. And then they promise and commit to doing 3 days of this testing. It's supposedly the formula that they use for everybody. And you had to have a minimum of 4 to 6 hours of the actual exorcism, testing, deliverance, whatever their process was, the prayers that they do to test for manifestations or to see if there's something happening that is supernatural, that needs their official way that they use the rite of exorcisms, which I'd already had for 4 years at least, and then the false ones or whatever they were with Eitenauer and the abuse 2 years prior to that. So going there under the pretense of what we were told, that this was going to be a 3-day thing and what I was to expect. And so I know we left when it was still light out, and I remember we got to Tulsa when it was dark out, and so I don't remember all the official times on everything. But it was on a Sunday, and so that night I didn't sleep a whole lot, obviously. I had so much high hopes. You know, I was so happy to be there, in the sense that I thought that this was really finally going to be it. And everything that I'd been through was going to finally pay off, and that these people had the right approach as a Catholic. That's what I believed, and everybody else around, they aren't gonna, put me through all this stuff. They're just gonna do this testing, this really intense testing, and then just take care of it. And they basically claimed that in cases of demonic possession, severe demonic possession, which I'd already been diagnosed with years before, that it would take them usually less than 2 weeks to completely eliminate the demonic possession. That was their claim. And I had been going through this in the Arlington Diocese for 6 years. And so you can imagine how relieved I was to hear that. And to hear supposed success stories told by them and whatnot. So we went there, I think it was like 11 or something, that we were supposed to meet them at the gate. Because it's this really, really fancy, almost mansion type, but kind of small house that is in Tulsa in the hills, and there's a security gate way out a couple miles where they have to open it to let you in. So again, it's in the distance, so people don't really hear what's going on or know what's going on. It's very secluded and private in that sense. And so the first thing that we did, I remember them opening the door and greeting us. There was 2 priests there, and I didn't know what Father Chad Ripperger looked like, because I'd only heard his voice on some talks that I listened to. I hadn't actually seen his face that I can remember. But it was Paranello and then the other priest that I don't remember his last name or how to say it. And the 2 of them were there, and I remember, you don't really talk or say much when you first get there. I was extremely nervous, and there was a lot of agitation and internal manifestations. I was very uncomfortable. And I remember thinking, any minute now, the exorcist is going to walk through the door and greet me, right? That's why we came here. And all of a sudden, they're having this, it's like a high Trinity Mass. Every morning they do that, I guess. And it's like a 20-minute Mass. It's the shortest Mass that I've ever attended as a Catholic. And I don't know what makes it so short, but they use all the incense and all the bells and whistles and all that, and it's all in Latin. And so they did that, and then they brought me into this room one of many rooms, and started asking me questions for the interview part. And they told me that they were going to start asking some questions, do a little bit of an interview, and then just jump into the prayers, because they got to do the minimum of like 4 solid hours to 6 solid hours of prayer a day of that specific prayer that they do to test. So they start interrogating me, of course, asking all these questions about my life from infancy up, which I've been over with other therapists, psychologists, the Arlington Diocese. Like I said, open book. People knew all the facts and information regarding the traumas in my life and connections and everything that had happened. And so went into that for a while. As usual, everybody's kind of shocked. They always get that look on their face and their jaw kinds of drop sometimes, and they're like, well, okay. You know, and I've always kind of gotten that reaction from even therapists and stuff. And so things just a little bit more messed up than the worst thing that they've usually heard. And they had my background from what I went through in Arlington. I had all my paperwork, all the documentation, all the testing, evaluations, psychologically, spiritually speaking, everything from before Arlington, during Arlington. I had just had a whole stack like this of all my paperwork, medically, psychologically, spiritually, everything that's been done for them. They asked me to bring that there because that was what they were supposed to look at and over during the evening period when we went back to the hotel. So we stayed in a hotel, and then the person, the way they're supposed to do this is the person goes there that's being tested, they do the prayers, the testing, the interview, and then you go back in the evening, and then they look over the paperwork and they do their prayers and their determination and things. So we had this interview, and then a couple hours later, I think it was like 2 hours later, 3 hours later, we had mostly an interview, and they had done a few like 10-20 minutes of the prayers that they started. And it was actually quite intense. It was very uncomfortable for me. I'm not really sure how to explain it. It felt like what the exorcism rites were in Arlington, but times 100. Like faster. Everything happened more intensely, more quickly. Internally, from my aspect anyway. So it was lunch break, and we had to leave to go get lunch. We couldn't stay there, so we went to leave to go get lunch. And she gets in the car. I'm going to try not to say anyone's names. The priest, I don't care, but the woman who's with me. We go to get lunch, and of course, she's pulling out and runs over some sharp rock and busts a tire, which, of course, what can you do but laugh when you're a declue and that happens, you know, because it's just such the oldest trick in the book. And I know these priests must have known that. Then again, these 2 priests that were there only had 1 year and 2 years experience, which is by far less than my experience in dealing with it, you know, period. But anyways, tires busted. We can't leave for lunch. So we end up having lunch there, and they call the car company to come have them fix the tire, because obviously we need the tire fixed. And it was like a rental car, because we flew in, of course. And so, of course, on top of the automobile trouble, which happens typically in situations like this, just happened too many times to count. We're trapped there, and I remember thinking as a Catholic in my experience, I'm like, why would they bust the tire when we're already here? I remember thinking that doesn't make sense, because I'm used to the demons doing stuff and breaking cars down and stuff so you can't get to where you need to go for, you know, exorcism or prayers or whatever. But why in the world would they bust the tire while we're still here? And of course, that's what you immediately think because of what you've been through. It's what she thought. It's what everybody's thinking. And so I realized afterwards, at least what I thought as a Catholic, exactly why it happened. Because we ended up waiting for this guy that was supposed to take 20 minutes to get there to fix the tire. And it took him 6 hours to get there that day. And so instead of proceeding and doing the testing prayers and other things that they needed to do for this day, which there's 3 days, and I've been waiting years, and I live across the country, these are the 3 days that I have for them to do this. This is kind of more than life or death in this situation for me. And I assume that they would consider it as important. And so the logic behind was because they didn't want, well, it was Parinello making all the decisions. Let me just say right now, Father Frank Parinello, said that we couldn't start doing the prayers or testing or anything until the tow guy came to fix the tire. Because they didn't want to start anything and then have any sort of reactions or manifestations that happened that the tow person might hear. And so, again, just as a Catholic now, everything's different because everything's a game back then. But as a Catholic, I'm like, oh, this is why the tire got busted here. Because now they're not going to proceed until the tow guy comes, and the tow guy's not going to get here, is he? And so basically we were there the whole time with them talking and BSing and asking me questions they already asked me. They would not proceed. They would not do anything, which basically any skilled exorcist that knew what he was doing from a Catholic perspective would have known better and would have known how to handle that situation. Instead, the entire day was wasted for what we came there for. The tow guy came, fixed the tire, and they asked us to leave and come back the next day. But he asked me to leave all my papers and documents and things like that so that they could look over them that night, because they were going to look over them that night. So 2 other things I didn't mention yet on that day. Where was Father Chad Ripperger? We were both thinking that, me and the woman that was there with me. Where's this guy? Where's this exorcist that's so important, that knows how to do this, that respects and knows my background and what I've been through with the other dioceses and what I've been through to get here, and he's not there? Where is he? Well, it turns out he's at some conference giving a talk to a group of people. That's clearly more important than the demonically possessed, oppressed, tortured individual young woman that has been through hell of years, okay, with the diocese and abuse and all sorts of things like that. Knew the situation. He just had better things to do. So he's not there. So not only is the actual exorcist not there, the actual experienced exorcist that was supposed to be there is not there. You know, some guy that was a friend of the guy I was with went there one time with somebody, and this guy, alright, just don't say anything. I'm not gonna say anything. He went with somebody, and Chad Ripperger's there, and they do these prayers for these people that don't even go there that need it, you know? And he happens to be there, but he's not there when I get there. Like, this was so unbelievable to us that he's just not there. Where is he? So I thought, oh, maybe he'll be there tomorrow. We thought maybe he'll be there the second day, or at least by the third day. Well, so that happened. So he's not there. Where are you, Chad? Where were you? Huh? You know, like, so he's not there. Already mind-boggling. So we had that 20 minutes of prayers, 10, 15, 20 minutes tops of prayers on the first day, where it was supposed to be 4 to 6 hours with the actual exorcist. The exorcist isn't there. Instead, it's a guy who has had a year experience watching somebody else that basically interrogated me for 6 hours and made us wait for a tow truck. And then sent us on our way. So the second day we come in and they're like, yeah, we're going to extra pack it in. We're going to be jumping right into the prayers and testing first, since we missed all that yesterday, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And Ripperger's not there the second day either. Just not there. Once again, much more important things to do, apparently, as an exorcist. So that day, the second day, was wild. It's the part that's basically definitely going to go over this video. Guys. They did more interviewing, but not as much, and they went in to start their prayers and testings. And there were manifestations that had basically the woman that I was with shaking in her chair over in the corner, which is reactions I'm not that, like, unaccustomed to from what I've been through already. And, he was reading out of the books in different languages and different prayers, and certain things I recognized and certain things I didn't, but the manifestations, the feeling of it, everything's always the same. And there was just such an intense evil there. Like, I knew that there was an intense evil within me but in that atmosphere, in that place, looking back in retrospect, the evil, the intensity of the evil present in that place. Now I understand why. It's all evil. They are evil. Catholicism is evil. It is satanic. But as a Catholic, I'm sitting here thinking all this evil I'm feeling, oh, this is just because they're doing the right thing and it's so powerful and it's making everything surface. Yet, no good fruit, people. No good fruit. Because guess what? They did 30 minutes of prayers and testing on the second day. They interviewed me a little bit more. And before lunch, had sent us back to the hotel and told us not to come back the next day. How does this happen, you might be asking. Alright, so first day, 20 minutes of prayers tops, waiting for a tow truck, interviews me about my whole life, tells us to go back to the hotel and come back the next day, which we do, which then they said they're going to double the prayers, which would be like 8 to 10 hours of prayers. In actuality, they do under 30 minutes of it. There's manifestations and things that happen. And then they're sending us home around lunch and telling us not to come back. What's happening? How did this happen? This is what I'm going to try and explain what happened and how it happened. And guys, it's not going to be easy for me. And I'm going to need you to bear with me and be patient, please. Because it is very difficult for me. And I've referenced this point in time for being the point in time when I split. When I literally felt a mental split happen. When I completely cracked. Whatever you want to call it. Just completely cuckoo basket weaving nuts. Alright, that type of thing that happens to somebody. That's what happened to me when I was there. And the awareness of it was actually quite terrifying. And it'll probably be impossible for me to really convey the experience of it myself from what I knew and what I'd been through and being the person possessed and oppressed in that situation. And all my hopes banking on this. So whereas everybody else can show up there, meet the actual exorcist, have the actual exorcist interview and pray with them, have 4 to 6 hours of prayers over a 3-day period that is supposed to determine. Instead, I show up, exorcist is nowhere to be found, Chatty's gone talking to somebody at a conference in Wyoming or somewhere, wherever he was that was more important apparently, and I had less than an hour of prayer collectively the entire time there. The entire time there. It wasn't even given a day and a half. What sense does this make, people? What sense does this make? It doesn't make sense. So what I'm going to be going into is explaining how this happened, even though there will really be no logical sense for the reactions. I'm going to explain incident by incident exactly what happened and how things kind of started to fall apart. And my PTSD is going to be active during it, which means I'm going to have blankouts and I'm going to probably stray here and there sometimes with things, and I may need to take breaks in between what we're talking about. But I just wanted to be free. I just wanted this over, and my motivation and my support was the guy I was with at the time. On the phone with him texting me, telling me he loves me, he's there for me, he's never going to abandon me, never going to run away, A, B, C, D, E, F, G again, like everybody else. We were also optimistic the first night, even though that happened with the tire busting and them not doing anything past that first 20 minutes that morning. I mean, the woman who was there with me, she was convinced that they already knew. She was convinced like they know. Because the manifestation that happened the first day was intense. It was clearly demonic. She apparently also, in addition to what happened of the manifestations from me, heard a lion or tiger or something growling in the corner of the room. And she described a few different things that she saw and witnessed. And a lot of the typical symptoms that I had in Arlington during the rites of exorcism happen. in that just short few 20 minutes. And so we were convinced, and I would even ask her to make sure. I'm like, are you sure? And she's like, yeah, they know what's going on. They're finally going to help you, Danielle. This is it. You know, this is it. You're finally going to... It's what everybody thought. Everybody believed that this was it. So, I'm actually getting a tension headache. So I talk about things that are still very traumatizing to me that happens, and I have to break it up a little bit here and there. And so, there was no third day there. I'll just say that. It ended on this day, the second day. Which again, everything collectively was under an hour of prayers. And like a day and a half at the most even present there, when it was supposed to be 3 days of what I already said. We were still stuck in Tulsa that third day before flying back out the next day after that. What happened in the hotel room on the third day, what happened on the hotel room when we left and were told not to come back, was kind of the midst of the worst of the split and the crack and everything that happened. So they had me kneel down and gave me this set of prayers to pray. Memorize, like repetition type. It was all sorts of things like obedience and loyalty to the Catholic magisterium and Queen of Heaven. Hardly any talk about Jesus. Always, they will say God a lot, but there are a lot of gods in other religions and beliefs and stuff. There's one true God, but God in and of itself, the name, is not always specific to Christianity. But lots of Mary, Queen of Heaven, Catholic saints, and the magisterium and the Pope, and pretty much everybody but Jesus. There's not much of a mention of Jesus ever. They had me force through this prayer, and I came to pieces where I wouldn't be able to. I would cough, I would hesitate, I would kind of start to gag, and that was typical in exorcisms when they would try to get me to do different prayers or say different things. They're just typical manifestations, and again, it's all a game. It doesn't mean what people think it means. They're like, oh, she can't say it, the demon won't let her say it because it's a good thing to say. Well, maybe the demon's not letting me say it because they want you to think that it's not something that they want to say because it's something good, but it's really not. You know what I'm saying? People talk about how they know that angels, the fallen, and not, are far more intelligent and clever than us, but then act like they know exactly why they would do what they do. And so that doesn't make much sense either. But I was having a lot of difficulty at a certain point. And I was already under extreme stress, of course. And I'd been through the hours and hours of the interrogation, going through my life story again, which even though when I talk about it, I can be very calm and seem very disconnected, it really does take a toll on me. And it comes out in a panic attack a lot of the times and in other ways. And so that's complicated too. I was just exhausted. And it had gotten so intense at that point that I asked for a break, which I didn't think was going to be a big deal. I asked him if I could have a 5-minute break, to go to the restroom, drink some water, just kind of regather, because the panic and anxiety and everything was getting pretty intensified. And then I remember I hated myself after for asking for that break. Now, all of it was horrible, but back then, again, as a Catholic, I blamed myself kind of for asking for a break, which is ridiculous, to feel bad for something like that. They were like, yeah, sure, no, that's fine, go get some water, regroup, whatever. And then I did that, and then I started to head back into the chapel area, and instead they're all walking out. And they're like, well, just come back in this room, which is the one where they were interrogating me the whole day before, instead of doing actual testing or prayers. So basically, I'm being psychoanalyzed, being asked questions by a priest who has no idea what he's doing regarding that anyway, as far as I know, according to the time that they've told us he's been doing this. Because again, the actual exorcist is not there. He's out of state somewhere, giving a conference. Not even the courtesy to say so. To tell me, even later on, like between them, was not speaking with them. It was just so asinine. The whole situation was so asinine. Gosh, guys, I think I'm gonna need a little break before continuing. So we're in on the second day at least. I've given some background, so on the second day, things just get crazy from this point on out. And so the next segment I post is going to be the most intense. But already at this point, everything that I've explained in my mind is leading up to. I need a break. I'm worn. I'm drained. And I appreciate you guys bearing with me on this. I just think that the truth should be brought to the light about this, and especially if there's people considering getting into this and trying this as a last resort, or trying this as their only hope, supposedly, for getting help. It's the whole reason that I talk about my experience as, demonically possessed and Catholic exorcism rite in the diocese and different things that were done and what happened to me, and that it did far more harm than good. It did no good. I don't want anyone to go through that. I don't want anyone to go through that, and I want these priests to answer for it. And then I realize and I think about it and I'm like, it's the entire religion is corrupt. As a Catholic, I wanted them to answer for it because I believed the Catholic Church was of God, and it's not. The whole thing's corrupt. It's a waste of time for me to sit here and want these people to fess up to what they've done or step up, because they live by corruption. They are perverse. They are not of God. So how can I expect them to act as if they are? But talking about it brings my mind back to then, which is when I was a devout Catholic again, and when I was also demonically possessed. My brain seriously hurts. I'm dizzy. I'm having a lot of really heavy symptoms and episodes of the PTSD, which is what happens with stuff like this. So, sorry to leave it at this point already, guys, but I'm gonna have to get back on and continue tomorrow. Hopefully I'll be able to continue tomorrow. But I appreciate everybody listening and bearing with me on this. Alright, hopefully tomorrow we'll continue.